Hi, this is Mark Stewart. Welcome back to my continuing series on the long-term effects of bullying, how it can affect you and other adults years or even decades after you left the bullying behind, but more importantly, how you can find hope and healing so you can have a brighter future. This is part of the promotion for my book coming up in March, Names Will Hurt Me, Healing for Victims of Bullying. I can't go into as much detail in these short videos as I did in the book. Everything I touch on here, you will find at least 2 or 3 times the amount of information in the book. I go into a lot more detail, I give a lot more examples. But even if you don't buy the book, if you struggle with issues from the bullying, you can get help and healing just by watching these videos. I've already had some feedback from some people who told me that it's helping them. You can have healing. I know, because if you go back to the video number 2 where I gave my story, I went through hell. But I came on the other side of it eventually. And now I have a life that I enjoy. And you can too. And let's start looking now at the idea of getting rid of the baggage. We already looked at that. Let's look at balancing the tires. In fact, in the last couple videos, we looked at emptying the baggage. First, making peace with your past, and then the idea of forgiveness. Now, I know people get kind of anxious when I mention the word forgiveness. Why should I forgive them? I covered that really heavily in the video. But basically, forgiveness is not so much condoning what they did or justifying what they did, but releasing you from the anger. I don't want to go back and revisit that. We don't have time in these videos. So let's talk about the next stage, which is balancing the tires. Because if you don't do anything about it, if you let the anger and the frustration and the anxiety continue, eventually what happens is you end up with this out of balance tires. And what happens when you drive a car with out of balance tires? It's constantly trying to pull you off the road. Have you ever driven a car where you're driving down the road and it's pulling to one side or the other because either a low tire or a tire out of balance? And if you move your attention away for just 1 second, you can either be in the other lane and into traffic or off the road. So you have to sit there and focus totally and have both hands on the wheel because it's pulling. And if you drive very long, you feel exhausted at the end. That's what it's like when you have the wrong attitude. So let's look at what this out of balance tires look like. Let's take a look at them. First of all, this is what a lot of people call the victim mentality. And in the next video, I'm going to cover the opposite of it, but not as in just the victim mentality, but as a more balanced mentality. But the victim mentality is really easy to identify. And if you start seeing yourself in this, you don't have to stay there. First of all, it's a distorted filter. You see everything through this filter, and it destroys things around you, destroys your life. You don't have to stay there. You really can get past this. You were a victim when the bullies were calling you names, whether they were physically abusing you. You were a victim. And it's easy, if you don't do something about it, to remain a victim in your head, to have that mindset. But you don't have to stay there. Negative self-talk. Okay, that's the next thing about the victim mentality, is that you have a negative dialogue. Everybody, you, myself, everybody in this world has that internal voice. And even when you're talking to others, but especially when you're alone, there's a constant dialogue or conversation going on in your head. You might even speak it out loud sometimes, kind of talking to yourself. People do it. But when you are in the victim mode, that self-talk is very negative. And it keeps you thinking in the negative terms. Because that dialogue up here has a lot to do with the actions you take and the thoughts you think. Okay, negative events, if you have a victim mentality, are considered permanent. If you get laid off, you'll never find another job. If you are in a romantic relationship and your partner breaks up with you, you think, well, I'll never find anyone else, and that's the way you feel because you really do believe it's hopeless. But on the flip side of that, if something good happens, oh, that'll never last. It's a really distorted filter, and you don't want to stay here. Next, the blame game. If you have a victim mentality, everything that happens has to have someone to blame. If you lose a job, it's either the boss's fault, a coworker's fault, or maybe you take the blame on yourself and it's your fault. But somebody has to be to blame, because it can't be just because it's business and the company downsized or the economy's changed. No, it can't be that. Somebody has to be to blame, so that you have something to direct the anger and the frustration towards. This is not a healthy way of looking at things. And placing blame on yourself or someone else doesn't do you any good. It doesn't get you towards your goals. Failures are considered perpetual. If you fail, if you attempt to get a degree and you flunk a class, you expand that out to, I'll never be able to get this degree because I can't possibly pass all these classes. Even if you would have passed other classes earlier, you've already got a record of passing classes. You flunked one, therefore it's all over. You fail at your job and you're going to get fired, it's over. You fail in one relationship and you're never going to be able to find anyone who loves you. You're going to be alone and die lonely. Now that one I know, because that's how I felt. My biggest fear became being alone, because it wasn't just the bullying that happened from the boys. I'm going to give you another example from my life. The one that really hurt the worst was the girls. Because, for example, there was one girl I wanted to go out with. She was really pretty and I thought she was really sweet. No, she wasn't. Because when I walked by, the group of girls saw me looking at her. And one of the girls looked at the girl I liked and said, "Why don't you go out with Sewer?" And of course she went, "Ew!" really loud where everybody could hear it, including me. And then they all walked away laughing and talking about how gross it would be to go out with me. So guess what? I developed a pretty bad complex thinking no woman's ever going to want me and ever going to love me for me. How could that be? So my biggest fear was being alone. So anytime a romantic relationship ended, I just took that so much further that I'm always going to be alone. You take any failures and you just stretch them out so much further. It's not a balanced perspective. Now, along with that, you end up, because of that negative outlook and that negative self-talk, which means you probably are also speaking physically to other people, everything's negative, you're going to attract negative people. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but a lot of people have heard of the idea of the law of attraction. And it's actually got some merit. Some people take it too far. Some people say that if a large group of people, say in a community, are all thinking negative, then maybe there'll be an earthquake and they'll bring something. Or they'll say that you can simply think the right thoughts and checks are going to magically show up in the mail. That's not reality. Let's deal with the balanced idea. There is a balance to things, okay? But there is some truth to this. If you are constantly speaking negative, thinking negative, your body language, everything about you is going to be negative. Positive people aren't going to want to be around you a lot because you're going to pull them down and they don't want to be down. But negative people, people that have negative attitudes themselves, are going to be drawn to you like a magnet, and you're going to sit there and console each other and talk about how bad the world is and how bad everybody is to you. And maybe they are, but and at least they were when you were young, and the bullies were mean to you for often things just being yourself. But you perpetuate that as an adult if you keep that negative attitude. You have to change that. And that's not that easy. I'm not saying it's just, bam, I can go, I'm positive and everything's great. No, I'm not going to tell you that. In the next video, I'm actually going to talk about just giving kind of a framework that's the opposite of this, of what the balanced perspective looks like. The video after that, that's where it gets really fun, because I'm going to talk about reprogramming your GPS. In this case, the GPS is going to be your mind, because the whole metaphor here is the ultimate road trip. Life is a road trip. And you're going to be able to point that GPS in the direction you want to go and get there. But you have to understand first where you are now, at least part of you. It may not be complete. Maybe you don't fit all of this, but you probably see yourself in parts of it. And then we're going to look at what's the opposite, what's the balanced view. And then we're going to get into beginning to change it. And how do you change that mindset and become the person you want to be and get where you want to be in life. My life is so much different now, and I can testify that it's possible. But if you don't change it, you're going to continue to attract those negative people, and the people you are around really do influence. If you hang around negative people, they're just going to keep bringing you down. You're never going to get anywhere. You're going to be spinning your wheels constantly and never making headway. The last thing is you will have a very low tolerance for risk. You have to risk to get reward. It doesn't matter if it's investments. It doesn't matter if it's maybe going for a new job. You have to step out of your comfort zone, and you have to be willing to take some risk. If you don't, you'll never get to the next level because you'll be stuck. Now I'm going to grab a marker and I'm going to show you the idea. There's 3 ways you can go. One is if you continue in this mindset, you fail, you go down, you fail, you go down, you get for a while, and it looks like a downward staircase. You can also play it safe. You can say, I'm just not going to risk anything, and I'm going to play it safe from here on. I've got a job that maybe it's not what I want, but it barely pays the bills, and it's safe. There's no pressure, but you're not growing as a person, or maybe you're in a relationship that really isn't healthy, but it's tolerable. It could be anything where you're not happy, but yet it's tolerable. It's something you can deal with. Now, that's kind of the idea of a flat line. And last time I saw a heart monitor, flat line meant dead. Well, guess what? This feels like death. When you aren't moving and you aren't going up, you aren't going down, you're just existing. If it's not something that you're enjoying, if it's not something that you're really passionate about, it can feel like dying every day. In fact, I went to a job for a while. I had to take a job when I was in college for a while where I was doing payroll, and I'm a creative person. I told someone, they said, well, what is it about that job? I said, it's just not what I'm passionate about. And every day I walk in that door, I feel like a part of my soul dies. I admire people who can do accounting. I admire people who can do those little details. But for me, it just wasn't me. It wasn't my personality. I like people. I like creative things. I like art. I like creating graphics. It just felt like I was dying every day. And I was existing. You don't have to be there. But the other one is this. This is the line you should have. Because you start going up, you take that risk and you start getting some success, but guess what? Success cannot, just like failure is not perpetual, even if you think it is. Success is not perpetual. You're going to have a failure. You're going to end up losing some ground. But then you pick back up. And maybe you end up doing a little bit more of this. Maybe down, maybe you kind of flatline for a little while and you find it. But no matter what, the idea is it's going to look like the stock market. It's going to be a continuous up. Over time, if you were to, you take a little snapshot of maybe a current situation, it might seem like you're not moving for a while. Things are kind of flat. Well, maybe you needed to rest. Maybe you needed to not take risk for a while. Maybe you had a failure and you dropped down a little bit. We're going to talk about that in the next one. Failure is not necessarily a bad thing. You learn a lot when you fail. And it can be a very positive thing in a lot of ways. But then you can maybe be flatlined for a little while, or maybe had something, and then all of a sudden you have this huge jump and you end up taking a huge step forward. Over time, if you were to look at the big picture, if you have the right attitude, you identify where you want to go. Because you can't just say, I'm going to start going without having a sense of where you're going. If you get a handle on that, you get your GPS programmed right, you get your directions right, and you start going every day, taking another step towards where you want to be, what you will see is that you will be continuing to go up over the long haul. This is possible. You can begin to follow your dreams. You can begin to have the life you desire. Thank you for watching this video. Hang in there for the next one. And then let's talk about healing and beginning to really rock it and find the life that you love. Find what you deserve. Find your passion. Identify your passion. Go for your passion. And get a life that is unique to you, that you enjoy. Thank you.